you know, we're here today to honor General Wesley Clark on the occasion of the publication of his book, Waging Modern War. After this press conference, we will have a book signing and reception, and then General Clark will speak and answer questions. General Wesley Clark is a hero to Albanians throughout the world. And he's a hero because of the critical role that he played as NATO's Supreme Commander in Europe in finally putting a stop to 10 years of Slobodan Milosevic's genocidal march across Southeast Europe. As you know, a march that culminated in the deaths of thousands of Kosovar Albanians and the expulsion of close to 1 million. Albanian Americans are grateful to General Clark, especially because he continues to be a voice for U.S. leadership to prevent the revival of the nightmarish vision of Slobodan Milosevic, a nightmarish vision of ethnically cleansed mini-states throughout Europe. And he continues to be a voice for bringing a just and lasting peace to the Balkans, a democratic, peaceful, and secure Balkans.
I wanted to begin by presenting something to General Clark, and I want to tell you how I came upon this, because the story will make you proud as it made me proud. This was sitting in our bedroom, and I took it to give it to General Clark tonight because I'm going to get another one. But this is made for me by an artist in Cloyes. This is made from a block of Albanian alabaster. Imagine the artists we have, that they can take a block of alabaster, a square, and make this beautiful shaponia, this eagle, in Albanian shaponia, this beautiful shaponia. Isn't this wonderful? Okay. This really, I think, epitomizes the greatness of Albanians in so many ways, that someone could have the patience to sit down, and Lord knows how long it took to take a piece of stone like this, but they did it. And I'm going to call this gentleman again and have him start making more and more, because there's no question in my mind that this is an award that we're going to give out every year. But the first recipient of this award, and for tonight we're calling it the Albanian American Civic League Balkan Peace Award. We're giving it out in your name, and we're going to have an inscription put on for the general, and this will be hopefully in an honored place in your office or your home in Arkansas. We don't know where, but we're just honored that we could have this, the privilege of giving him this beautiful object that represents the spirit of the Albanian people. Okay?
Joe, thank you very much. What I'd like to do is just talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to take some questions and talk some more. First of all, let me thank you all for coming tonight. You just make me feel wonderful. I feel like part of your great family. Thank you. Thank you also for all you are doing to help your family members and all the other people in Kosovo who are struggling and working to bring freedom and democracy and westernization to that land. Thank you for your generosity for people abroad. You know, our nation is a nation that came from everywhere else. People came to America because they wanted to be here. They left behind their families, their friends. My grandfather came from a place in Belarus called Minsk over 100 years ago. He came to Chicago with his brother. He brought his fiancée and her younger sister. And so today I have 100 cousins. All of us came from abroad, and I feel a special kinship with you all. who have recently become Americans, are part of this country, and are still reaching out your hands in support to people in your homeland. Thank you for being great Americans and great human beings. Now I have to tell you, I always knew where Albania was on the map. I did. We knew that it was under the protection of Red China. It was. We knew that if you were an American in the 1960s and 70s, you didn't dare go there. We all knew who John Belushi was. We knew he was an Albanian. And so we were all disposed to like Albanians and want to go there. So I can't tell you how happy we were at the end of the Cold War when Albania moved to become part of the West. Still, I hadn't gone to Albania. My first trip there was the summer of 1998. But I had studied about Albania, and I had learned about the problem of Kosovo. We talked about it many times during the Dayton negotiations. In 1995, we knew that Milosevic had to release his iron grip on Kosovo, but he wouldn't discuss it. The most we could ever get was an American embassy information center in Pristina. No more. In early March of 1998, I went down to Macedonia to visit the 350 American soldiers who were part of the UN Preventive Deployment Force. When I landed, the American ambassador said, "You have to go see President Gligorov right away." I went in to see the president. It was late on a Saturday afternoon. He was there with two of his ministers. And the American ambassador and I joined the conversation. And President Gligorov told me he was worried about what was happening in Kosovo. He said the Serb police had just massacred the Zashari family, 60 people. He said, "You can't treat people that way." He said, especially Albanian people. He said, there will be war. And he said that Milosevic will pretend to negotiate, but really he only understands the threat of military force. I carried that message back to Washington. But some people in Washington did not want to hear it. During the summer of 1998, I worked to try to create a NATO threat to restrain Milosevic. I remember calling him on the 25th of June. Ambassador Richard Holbrooke was there. Holbrooke had met with Rugova. He was meeting with Milosevic. He was traveling to the village of Cluj, which at that time was considered the most, he said, Holbrooke said, was the most dangerous place in Europe. And he asked me to call Milosevic and make sure Milosevic knew he was in danger. So I called Milosevic. Milosevic was very cordial on the telephone. He invited me to come to Serbia. Please come and ride horses at Karađorđevo. Please, I can play golf. Oh yes, thank you, Mr. President. I said, but Mr. President, what we don't want you to do is to attack your own people. And he said to me, he said, General Clark, he says, these are all my own people. They're all citizens of our country. And I just want them to live together in peace, he said, despite your threats. My NATO threats. Well, I had many hours of dealing with Milosevic, and I knew what a liar he was. And the next day, after Holbrooke had left, he attacked with his military and paramilitary Cluj. And through the summer of 1998, he conducted a campaign of ethnic cleansing in the villages in Drenica. NATO Secretary General Solana called it a village a day keeps NATO away, because Milosevic knew that as long as he only attacked 1 or 2 villages a day, he could escape the wrath of NATO. But we called him on the carpet. We didn't let him escape NATO attention. And after Ambassador Holbrooke did the negotiations in early October that resulted in the creation of the Kosovo Verification Mission, I realized that Milosevic had not committed himself to withdraw forces. So with Secretary General Javier Solana and General Naumann, we took a trip to Belgrade. And we talked to Milosevic, and he got very angry. I went back alone so I could talk to him one man on another. I said, Mr. President, if you don't pull those forces back out of the field, we're going to bomb you. And of course, here he was, the president of a country in his own palace. And here am I, just an American general, a man he's known for 5 years, threatening him. So he shrugged his shoulders and he said, I think there's a term in Serbian, it's called INA. And he just said, well, General Clark, he said, NATO must do what it must do. I said, well, Mr. President, get real. You don't want to be bombed by NATO. He said, no, you're right. So we used the threat. We held off the conflict. There were 2 really bad times in the war. The first had to do with Albanian civilians who were killed in the air attacks. And all I want to tell you right now is how terribly sorry all of us in NATO were for their casualties.
Oh, we know that.
But it was a terrible thing, and that was the worst night of the war. There was a place called, I think, Korisa, and we had watched it, and we knew this farmhouse was a Serb police station. We saw the Serb vehicles there, and unfortunately that night it was used to imprison Albanian civilians. And the other bad time in the war was when the KLA was attacking over Mount Pastrick. Because I know there's some people here who fought in that battle from the Atlantic Brigade. And I know that you guys are very proud of what you did there. But I knew what the Serbs had waiting for you. And I knew how little I could do to help. And I worried about that a lot. Thank God it worked out okay. You accomplished the mission, and we accomplished our mission to help you, and Milosevic recognized that he was facing inevitable defeat. And so he gave in to all of NATO's conditions. He called a ceasefire, he pulled all his forces and his thugs back out. NATO went in, and we had the largest spontaneous return of refugees in Europe since World War II. And you know, I knew this was going to happen because I talked to the Albanian refugees. UN officials said, oh no, you have to slow them down, there might be mines. I said, you can't slow these people down. They're going to their homes. I went in early. I think the 17th, 18th of June was my first trip into Kosovo. I went in with the Secretary of Defense. We went up the road. We stopped in villages and cities, and we were just surrounded by people. I think he had no idea what the incredibly powerful emotions were. You see, for some of the people in the United States, the NATO effort was, I hate to say it, but it was more of a distraction. They didn't understand. But for me, it was a passion. We were dealing with a man whom I believe is a mass murderer, and that's Slobodan Milosevic. And he told me in January of 1999 that Kosovo was more important than his head. And so I knew that when we went after him in Kosovo, he would lose his head. We're all Americans. We should all be in this together, whether we live on this side of the Atlantic or that side of the Atlantic. So I want to tell you, I'm very, very proud to be with you tonight. I'm very proud of the spirit and the courage, the patriotism shown by the Albanian American community. I feel very, very honored the way you've welcomed me and taken me into your hearts. And I thank you for that.